welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 tailgate. We have a locked and loaded Saturday of spring games, so we're going to begin tearing through some of that. I mean, we're talking Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Penn State, Miami. The big dogs will be out. What are we looking forward to? What are we keeping our eye on? Of course, all that and more. Some portal buzz coming up. But before we jump into some of the business of the day, there are two items I want to get to. The first of which is, yes, we are working on it. Okay? We have alerted everybody. We are knocking on all the doors, and we believe that the issues on the audio side will be fixed very soon. I've directed a lot of you who've reached out to come hang out with us on YouTube, where everything is humming along nicely. Thank you very much, YouTube. But yes, we realize that there is an issue across the audio side. It should be fixed very soon, and we appreciate your patience in advance. The second item, before we jump into this, comes from our friend Chris. Because Danny was not on the show on Monday, Chris says, boys, I can certainly vouch for Danny and his golf game, a golf game that was reported on during the 2024 NCAA tournament. Lake Nona, is it Nona?
Yeah, Lake Nona.
Like my grandma.
Lake Nona is still talking about his 300-yard drive on 8. So Danny, we missed you on Monday. You were out there defending your title. You went for 300 on 8? Take us through the whole, especially as we're sitting here in Masters.
Oh, well, let's just leave it at the drive because Chris said it out there. He did point out it was 300, maybe a little bit of an underestimation. Might have been slightly past 300. We'll forget about the approach, which I kind of bladed over the green, then put a putt way past it about 20 feet, but did make the putt for par. So it wasn't the prettiest of pars, but when you're sitting about 60 yards out from the green, you would expect to have some better looks than that. Shout out to the Florida Citrus Sports crew. They're awesome. Always put on a great event. Chris is helping out there. He did a great job. It was great catching up with him. He didn't tell this. I'll tell the story. So when I was at Florida State LSU game in Orlando, I had a sideline pass for the game, and I brought my 11-year-old Brady with me. And the security was really giving me a hard time about Brady, my daughter, because I was trying to get her on the field with me to say hello. So, like, the first time I went through, there was, like, a couple security guards, and they're like, no, you only have one pass. Where's her pass? I'm like, she's with me. Not good enough. So Chris, not once but twice, saw this unfold and was like, hey. He's good. Like, let him through. So he came through with the VIP access as well at the Citrus Bowl there last year, or else, like, I was telling her to wait in the tunnel and I was on the field and she was sitting there all sad. Like, what do I get to do? Sitting in the tunnel. So it would have been a really long night for her if she had to stay there the whole time. So Chris is good people, man. It was fun, but it was a really fun tournament. A lot of people got to catch up with. Last year, there were some coaches there. Mike Norvell was there. This year, not see any coaches, but I did see one, Gabe Davis, former UCF wide receiver, now with the Jags after starting his career in Buffalo. He secured the bag. I'll say this all the time, and I feel like I'm getting older when I say it. These dudes are ginormous. Like, Gabe Davis is a monster of a human being. Like, I felt he's only listed at 6'2". I felt like I was looking up at him. Maybe I'm getting old. I don't know what it is, but he is jacked, like, big. I'm like, man, would have been nice to throw to a guy like that. But yeah, it was a great time. Really good time. What did you say, Tom?
I just said you're shrinking. You're getting old. You're shrinking.
I think I am. My back, I'm getting crooked. It's starting to go. It's definitely starting to go.
There's an incredibly unfortunately for Gabe Davis, there's one thing that is going to stick in my mind for a long time about Gabe Davis. And they were doing a social media thing with the Buffalo Bills. And one of the questions that they were asking all these players is like, okay, so like, who on the team would you allow to date your sister? And Stephon Diggs' first answer is not Gabe Davis.
Have you seen the one with the Vikings?
No.
Oh, when Diggs is on the Vikings, it got kind of awkward because everybody's answer for who would you not want to date your sister was Diggs. And like they asked Dalvin, and he's like, Yeah, what kind of questions?
Yeah. So
I'd say 7 out of 10 times that question was asked of teammates of mine of who would you want to date your sister or your daughter? It was me. That might have been my greatest accomplishment ever. Although
in the
NFL highest bar, but I at least stood above the bar from the rest.
Listen, great locker room guy, yeah, absolutely. I can rock with that as well. All right. So you might know it's April 10th, which means that we are 5 days from the spring transfer window opening. We've already got some buzz. So let's jump into the portal. All right, we already got some buzz all across the country. We've got Oregon State running back Damian Martinez. Tom, your boy, Bear Alexander. What's this? Is this going to be 8 schools in 9 years? Right?
It's at least 7 and 7.
Yeah, it's at least 7 and 7.
It might be 8 and 7. Like, I think he went to 5 high schools, didn't he? There was something about the high school, like.
I did some research on this last night.
Good.
I think he actually played for 7 different. Assuming he doesn't actually go back to USC, he will have played for 7 teams in 7 years, which is really quite the accomplishment. Journeyman. He would have had 8, but he was not eligible to play by the Dallas district, which is why he went to IMG that one year. However, I don't think this is a record. I'm fairly sure that a guy named Jake Garcia has the record. You guys remember Jake Garcia?
Yep, the quarterback.
He finished up his career. God, I assume he's finished. Maybe he's still on.
He might still be going. You never know these days.
Yeah.
So Jake Garcia was at Narbonne, La Abra, Valdosta for, I think it was a game before they're like, actually, no, you're not eligible. He was at Poly. Then he was at Grayson. And there was some kind of like his parents got divorced to like declare like where he lived officially, right? I'm spitballing here, but
no. I remember this. I remember.
Yeah, there was some really weird stuff, and I think it was also they literally ended their marriage at least temporarily to help the 4-star quarterback compete on the field for a senior season of high school, according to Saturday Down South, which is dedication to it.
Loving your boy.
He signed with Miami. He went to Missouri and then East Carolina. So I think if we count the Poly, he has 8. But I don't know if they actually played for Poly. So Bear might have tied the record. We're really going to need Bear, if he wants to just own this record, play where? What are we thinking? Texas maybe this year? And then play it like, I don't know, go back to Georgia. No, that'd be the same team, so can't count that. Go to like LSU for the final year next year. Just like 8 schools, 8 years would be incredible.
Just treat it as an official visit, except you enroll every time.
Oh,
I want to say when I was talking on Monday's show, and I mentioned Bear Alexander as the type of guy you can find in the portal on defensive line in the spring, I did not have any intel that Bear Alexander was going to be entering the transfer portal. I was just bringing him up because he had done it last year, so I wasn't reporting anything. People thought I was dropping a hint, and I've heard no. That was just dumb luck.
Can I read you guys something?
Yeah.
This is from the House of Victory, the premier collective for USC student athletes, right? That's who runs their NIL. From March 29th, that is just under 11 days ago, 12 days ago, less than 2 weeks. The big man in the trenches is back with a lot of A's. House of Victory is thrilled to have re-signed our all Pac-12 junior defensive lineman, Bear Alexander, for another high-impact year on and off the field. Hashtag fight on. How does this work? Because I'm curious. Is it going to be a Caden Proctor situation where, I think Iowa's been trying to say they only lost 10% or 15% of the money that they actually were going to pay him. But at what point are these NILs and the collectives, collectives going to figure out that this is a very real possibility, if not a likelihood, that the player is going to leave if they don't have some sort of protection financially. And then they're like, they can double dip. You can get paid from two schools in the same year, which is just wild to me that the collectives have not figured out a way to protect themselves.
They might have. I mean, but
maybe they do. Maybe they do. I just think the optics of this look awful for the collective to be like, he's back for another year. And then 2 weeks later, he's in the portal bouncing.
I have no idea how it's going to work. We'll see.
Where's he going?
Well, no, not with the Bear Alexander or USC specifically, but I would think I have not seen an NIL. I don't have my hands on an NIL contract right now, but I would have to imagine that there are stipulations, stipends, like some things like must play in a game. You know, like the payments are dependent on.
That's pay for play, which we're not supposed to do. Remember? Like, see, that's where I think there's.
Are they dependent on your
where you live?
Location. Yeah.
My NIL payment's scheduled to hit the bank account tomorrow afternoon, Chip. I'm sure yours is too.
This is
the most.
Do we have a payday tomorrow?
I think so.
Okay. Nice.
This is the most extreme example of somebody taking advantage of the system. But with the new NCAA proposal that they put forth, which basically says you can transfer every single year as long as you're academically eligible and you can bounce from school to school, doesn't the way we have to look at this, and trust me, I'm dealing this with in my family somewhat with what's going on with my nephew because he had a big year, right? And he's already transferred once from Clemson to NC State, and now he has the option if he wanted to transfer again. So this is something that's like I'm helping my sister and brother-in-law, talking to them last night about, what he should do. But if all of us were given 1-year contracts every single year, wouldn't we like go out and see what's out there and
right.
like see what's happening, like see what the landscape holds to make sure you're getting your proper value? And I think there's a flaw. Like, I don't think it should be that way. I think that's one of the issues that we've talked a lot on here of million times is why they need structure, why they need multi-year contracts, why the collectives and the schools need some protection, because basically what the NCAA just did is said, yep, everyone is free to go after every single year, And so like, even if they have protections where they have an exclusive window to negotiate with that player, hey, you've got, and maybe that is before the portal opens. Maybe they already have that. And so you want to protect your guys before, then give them a new deal before it opens. But it's a mess. Like, it really is.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't want to like build out like a whole, like, pass it around. But I did want to mention in the context of this ever-changing environment that I thought that the NCAA, at least, it's a half measure, right? But it is them trying to put forth, and this is only going to be voted on next week, exactly what Danny mentioned. Okay, the NCAA cannot fight the courts in terms of being able to transfer as many times as you want and being able to, capitalize on NIL. But if the NCAA, they're hearing from the coaches, we need control, and the coaches are trying to play to do we even care about the academics anymore? And so that's what the NCAA is trying to say. Like, okay, you can transfer as many times as you want, wherever you want, but you've got to be academically eligible. You've got to have the grades together. You've got to be in good standing to be able to do it. I'm not going to sit here and applaud the NCAA, but I mean, doesn't at least that tiny little wrinkle make some bit of sense, I guess? I mean, if we're going to say every single student has the ability to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness, why can't athletes, right? That was at the very beginning of this conversation. Any single student can transfer as much as they want to. That is true, but you do need to be in good standing enough to be able to transfer. So it is not going to be the kind of control that coaches really want. But if this does end up passing, I mean, it's probably only going to be around for a couple of years until we break the system and build a new one. But I think that it is sensible that they would make this adjustment to the overall transfer world.
I don't really think we should be giving them any credit here because they're basically just codifying what the West Virginia courts said. Hey, guys, can't do that, right? Like, can't block these transfers. They're not employees. Like that. It wasn't like they came up with this before the courts just told them this is what the rule is going to be. Now they could in theory, continue to fight the courts. But this is basically just them saying, all right, like white flag on this one. Like we're not going to fight this. It's another 9-0 loser.
But that, so for, I don't want to like turn it right to Ben, but like for an athlete, they would say, okay, I would like to see what's out there, but I also need to make sure my own house is in order to be able to get up and go. That makes sense.
So that was one of the things was more bizarre to me than anything I've ever, like, it was just, it hit me like a ton of bricks. So we're at the game in Phoenix, and after it's over, we're kind of lingering around and we're walking out, and a bunch of NC State fans, like into this mass of people just walking out. A couple of them came up and they were like, hey, you know, Ben was awesome this year. And almost all of them, is he coming back? And I had not even considered it. Neither had Ben or his family. And I'm like, why wouldn't he? You know, and Ben doesn't want to leave. I mean, he is happy there. He does not want to leave, but he also has one more year to maximize his earning possibility. So like, why wouldn't he? And he hasn't entered the portal. He hasn't done anything. Like, he's still like just thinking about this. And I am basically trying to give them the landscape of what they could possibly do. And it's like, why wouldn't you consider it? Like, you'd be foolish just to blindly go back without at least exploring options, you know, because of what's at stake financially. And like we always say this all the time, they already had one assistant leave for another job at Ohio State.
Joel Justice.
Who knows? Like, he could have gone to somewhere else. Like, it's just, there's just this really weird time that we're in that I think is unfortunate, because let's say if he does leave, and let's say if Mo Diarra and if a couple other players left to go get bigger paydays, where does that leave the NC State fan?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, that to me leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. Like, what, man, they were just getting attracted and really feeling like this is part of a special team, and they could all be coming back. And maybe they do. I would love to see them come back. But if they don't, and it's broken up because of money, because there wasn't a system in place that protected against something like this happening, I think that's a shame. And we're letting it all happen. I mean, we don't have any power, but like, no one's doing anything about it. And I worry what it's doing to fan bases. I mean, did you see Indiana State?
Mm-hmm.
So they had this incredible run. All 5 starters hit the road, and the coach, by the way.
Right.
So like, if you're a Sycamore fan, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, I think that sucks for sports in general, for college sports.
Well, you asked what an NC State fan's supposed to do. Based on the ones I know, they'll probably just go to a Fish concert and be fine. But I will say, like, Purdue needs a center if Ben's.
That's right. Right. I mean, there will be, like, that's a thing. He played a lot in the run, and he's got some attractors, I'm sure, some potential suitors that probably would make him more money if he wanted to go there, And the fact that, like, we're even having this conversation is so wild to me,
Yeah. I believe the organization names are Pack of Wolves and Savage Wolves, NIL.
And right. I mean, he has his opportunity to go there. And I would love to see him go back there, but you never know. They also, we're going down the really rabbit hole. They also signed another center that they brought in from Louisville, a transfer that's supposed to be a stud, so I don't know.
Wild stuff. I will say, the one last NC State basketball note, Kevin Keats had a starting lineup where every single player started their career elsewhere, and he got them to the Final Four.
Right.
If you want to talk about being able to identify pieces that you think can fit together, then that's at least the head coach who seems to be able to balance it for sure. All right, bud. Do you want your you said you can give me 3 minutes. We didn't talk about the lawsuit when the first ruling came down. Wasn't going to talk about it when the next ruling came down. Like, I feel like we've got a lot more stages to this, but if you've got 3 minutes of billable hours, I'll check in with Bud Elliott Esquire on the latest in the legal fight between the Atlantic Coast Conference and Florida State University.
Yeah, we can do it.
Okay, go for it.
Are we playing the music?
Oh, hold on. Let me see if I've got to find that one. Where's billable hours? Billable hours.
We don't have to.
Okay.
All right. So, yesterday they had a hearing on the ACC's motion to stay Florida State's filing in the state of Florida. Basically, we're still in a bit of a venue fight. So the ACC sued in sort of preemptive action in North Carolina, and the hearing up there, basically the judge said, this case should be held in North Carolina. Florida State is appealing that ruling in North Carolina. In the state of Florida, things went a lot better for FSU, as you kind of expect them to. It's why you have this whole venue fight, because they're both interested in having the suit heard where they want it heard due to various state laws and whatnot. So anyway, the ACC's motion was denied, shockingly, and the judge will rule on some of the other motions coming up at a later date. I believe April 22nd is the next one. However, I think the big takeaway here is that this is quite unlikely to be decided by the courts in a timely fashion. Both judges in their questioning, I interpret it as sort of like hinting at, like, shouldn't you guys just settle this? Like, shouldn't you guys just settle this type thing? Yesterday, the judge was like, this seems like kind of ideal for mediation at times. That he had mentioned, like, I was a mediator for 10 years and whatnot. So if we think there's going to be a quick resolution on this, it is more likely to come via some negotiated settlement as opposed to one of the courts, be it Florida, North Carolina, or maybe a federal court type action deciding it for us. That's kind of where we're at. Like, courts ain't gonna move real fast, y'all.
Yeah, that's what it had made me. I did not want to be dismissive to the bit larger, conversation. I just felt like my expectation has always been, as long as this thing is happening in the courts, until we've got a press release from both the university and the ACC indicating what the future is going to be, we're just going to continue to get taken through the process of hearing after hearing after hearing. Okay, so I agree with you. I strike this down. I support this. I strike that. These attorneys are bringing so many different claims that the judge then has to rule on each one of these claims. It gets a little awful. It gets awfully confusing for the average sports fan here. I think that ACC fans overreacted to the ruling in Charlotte. And I think that Florida State fans, maybe also had a similar response to the ruling that we got this week. We are sports fans, so we want to be like winners, losers.
Yeah. Right.
And that's just not the way the court system works. I mean, this is a serious place where serious things happen. And while there is billion-dollar implications to what, the decisions that are being made, I can't help but think that some of these judges are like, guys, what are we doing here? Can you two just go figure this out? And so it's probably where we're gonna end up. Danny, you got any insight?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I lean on Bud. I lean on a couple accounts that I follow to try to figure out which way it's going. Because like you said, I saw a bunch of ACC people saying, ooh, it's a big win for the ACC. And then within the same 24 hours, ooh, there's a big win for Florida State. I don't know what to make of any of it.
I think the answer is pretty obvious. Neutral site, Jerry World, settle it on the field.
Well, it's the most fair negotiations are when both sides are mad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably where this ends up, is that both sides are a little bit unhappy, and then we've got an end result that is more than likely Florida State no longer a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference in the future. How long it takes to get there and what exactly both sides are going to be a little bit mad about, we'll see. But that's sort of the expectation here. All right.
It's going to be a long flight to Seattle for the Knowles. I'm just saying, when you have to play those games.
Husky Stadium, buddy. After that long flight.
You're going to get off the plane. They're going to have stiff backs. I'm just saying, you might want to take Washington in those games, or in the reverse fixture the other way.
It's better than going to Cal and playing in front of 400 people that are protesting some climate change.
Well, listen,
that's true.
I got to say, I have had multiple. I think Daniel wrote the most recent one, either Daniel or David. I apologize, I don't have it pulled up, but I have heard some blowback from some of our Cal jokes.
Good.
From very well-reasoned, hey, look, things are not great, but we have this group, we go have season tickets, we tailgate all the time. We've got multiple invites to come out to Berkeley for a Cal football game. It's the whole Cover 3 crew, we'd love to have you out. We'd love to welcome you in. And it seems like they are truly passionate in a way that we were probably dismissive of in our jokes. So I'm not going to turn this into a Cal podcast. I'm not going to go full Cal Homer for 2024.
You should. That should be a bit.
Well, Jaden Knott, I told you, he's my favorite running back in the upcoming season. So you got Spav. I'm always down with Spav's boys.
And they added Sterling Gilbert as an offensive analyst who once gave Dante Foreman 50 carries when he was at University of Texas for Charlie Strong as the OC. So, Jaden Knott
Let's go. We're going for
Talking
Toby
about some
Walker.
college fantasy stuff, which we do have coming up, maybe.
Well, we lean into the bit, but I will say our Cal jokes are probably more apropos with Stanford than they are with Cal. Like, I think Stanford is who we make fun of Cal for being.
That's actually, and you know what? That's fair. So anyway, Bears fans, like I hear you, and I'm not always going to bend to peer pressure, but I got some like good, thorough, sound emails that were like, hey, like, look, blah, blah, blah. We've got this, and this going on, and we'd love to have you out. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm not coming, but cool. I hear you.
I mean, I don't want to yuck their yum. Like, I think like the diehard fans on the West Coast are about like 95, 98% of the diehard level of the fans on the West Coast. Like, and I won't go to 100% because I don't know about like any like poisoning trees incidents, you know, or like killing family members incidents like you see in Alabama. But there's just not as many of them.
Right.
You know, like you have some really diehard groups, but you don't have like 80,000 diehard type thing. But the communities that really love it, they do. It's just looked at as like a little bit more of like a niche support of a team type thing.
Bo Nix didn't do anything to help out there.
Oh, when he was talking about how awful like SEC culture is.
Yeah. He was like, "Oh, it's so much more laid back at Oregon. Just
everything's more laid back there, though." Yeah, that's how they approach things. But I will say, it's just a simple numbers game in the end. Like, I got so much heat the other day because I tweeted, you know, the title game should never start later than 8 p.m. Eastern, and I got all like these West Coast people saying, "Well, what about us?" And it's like, 17% of this country's population lives in the Pacific time zone. Why do 83% of us have to suffer for you? Just get over it. It's just a simple numbers thing.
And thank you, Dan Hurley, for just making it end so quickly. I was in studio. I couldn't literally cut it off, but you know, it was easy to go ahead and start piecing together your
Chip yelling at the producers, "Let's go live" with 10 minutes left in the game.
So Rizap, come on. All right. Coming up on the other side, on Wednesdays during the season, we give you a big game breakdown. How about a big spring game breakdown? Next.
The NWSL returns April 20th to CBS.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. On Wednesdays, we like to do a big game breakdown. So how about a big spring game breakdown? We can move pretty fast through these. I think what we were really looking to identify is a couple of things for each of these that we're keeping an eye on. Let's start with the Georgia Bulldogs. They are, to my mind, that number one with a dot going into the season. We might have some debates along the way, but the Bulldogs are going to be where the national conversation is going to start in terms of, you know, who is at the top or who is in front of everybody else going into it. But I'll let you get first crack at this. What are you interested in going into the Bulldogs spring game?
I want to know if Georgia has game records up front like they did in 2021. You know, that 2021 Georgia team, I think, ended up having like 4 first-round defensive linemen over the next 2 cycles, which is not normal. So I don't think they're going to be that level, right? But like the guys they had last year on the defensive interior were merely good. Like 110 out of 130 programs would love to have that combo, maybe more, like maybe 120. But for Georgia, a team that like expects to just destroy people up front, I want to know, like, do you guys have real difference makers? Like maybe what Bear Alexander could have been if he hit his ceiling at Georgia. He certainly made an impact last year at USC, some good and some bad as well. Maybe not all his fault, maybe some his fault. So I'm curious in that. There's been a lot of reports out there. I read Dogs 247 all the time. O-line seems to be kind of kicking Georgia's D-line's ass quite a bit. So maybe Georgia's got an awesome O-line, or maybe they got a little bit of just average, or maybe slightly above average here on the D-line. So I'm curious, why is the O-line winning so easily?
Is Michael Williams practicing?
Thought he was working back. Starks has not been practicing. Allen's been practicing. They feel pretty good on the edge, apparently. Like Damon Wilson's coming along nice.
If Michael Williams isn't practicing, that's why the offensive line is winning.
I think Mikel's playing more edge this year, though.
You could put him anywhere.
Yeah.
So, three names that are not going to be there: Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith. And there's this interesting balance right now where you've got, some players who've been in the program for a little while, like Dan Jackson at safety. You've got some players who maybe at corner, I guess you get Julian Humphrey might get a little bit more. Dallin Everett probably starts, but you've got 5-star safety KJ Bolden, number 14 player in the 2024 class, who's an early enrollee and might be sniffing more playing time than a lot of people realize. You've also got a former 5-star in Ellis Robinson, who's probably not physically there to be playing all the time, but everyone seems to believe that his ceiling is really high. You have this idea about Kirby Smart being from the Nick Saban tree and defensive backs and everything being real plug and play. I just think there's that interesting split that we have with the Bulldogs where you've got players who've been in the program, and then you've got younger players with less experience and higher ceiling. And I'm curious how that ends up balancing out. I don't think we necessarily get any answers from the spring game exclusively, but that's definitely the one piece I've got my eye on right now with the Georgia team where quarterback is answered, where you feel like, running back got answered through the portal. You've got enough dudes at wide receiver that you think it'll piece together. And like we've said here on the podcast, Oscar Delp might be having a good season. So, to build off of your defensive side, I'm looking at that secondary, and I'm curious to see how the pieces fit together.
Georgia's going to fly completely under the radar because the other teams like Ohio State, look at all the change and the turnover and all the intriguing storylines. You mentioned it. Carson Beck is back. You just, even with the players they lose, you just have to trust the recruiting rankings that we've seen. So they're going to be plugging in a 4 or 5-star. And in a lot of cases, somebody that we've seen that's already played some, like an Oscar Delp. They do have they got a lot of production they have to replace, but it's just one of those situations where you kind of just trust it and feel like, yep, they're going to be there. Is it just a matter if they are a national championship team or are they just a playoff team? Like that's kind of, and then we kind of figure that out as we go along. It's just, they just kind of fly under the radar just right there. All these other question marks, all these other schools, and they're just right where they need to be.
I would love that. Like that's for Georgia. That is a great spot to be because then you're just working on fine tuning the machine to make sure that when it's ready for, when the money's on the table, that you're rip roaring ready to go.
And like with some of these programs, like I feel like Jalen Milroe has to take a big step forward for them to make the playoffs, win the SEC, get to where Bama wants to be. With Carson Beck, I think he has to take incremental steps forward. He doesn't have to, he's already shown the ability that he's got. Like he can lead this team to a national championship. It's almost like, all right, is he going to be a top 5 pick? Is he going to be a Heisman Trophy winner? Is he going to be a national championship winning quarterback? And he doesn't need to improve that much to do it.
I agree with that. Bud?
I also want to see these receivers. Colby Young apparently has been just dominating for them.
Miami transfer.
Yeah, like if Ra Thomas and Dom Lovett can just be like reliable, good college targets, but like they're not super freaks, just like really nice college players. Maybe get Arian Smith to actually stay healthy for a season. I'd love to see what he can do. There's all kinds of clips of Kirby, mic'd up saying like, hey, nobody in this league can run with you, Arian. And that's probably true. He's maybe the fastest player. Well, there's a couple guys who are like Olympic hopefuls, but aside from those type of dudes, he's like legitimately crazy fast as a receiver. And Georgia does try to find ways to sneak him in the game and scheme it up. Maybe if he becomes a little bit more like a complete receiver or just can stay on the field with health, I am curious to see how he looks.
Craig Lawson in the chat says I deserve to be suspended for a show because of my Oscar Delp takes. Oscar Delp is a better blocker than Brock Bowers, Craig. You might not think so, but the tape and the numbers show. And I want to bring up the numbers because I was on Kevin Clark's podcast and I didn't have the numbers in front of me. I do right now. Georgia's 2023 rushing attack when Brock Bowers was playing, 47.9% success rate, 0.11 EPA per rush, 5.1 yards per carry. When Brock wasn't playing and Delp was in his place, 53.4% success rate, 0.17 EPA per rush, 6 yards per carry, because Oscar Delp was able to get across and get that backside defensive end on the split zone to make sure the play wasn't blown up in the backfield nearly as often as it happened when Bowers was doing it. So, he's better. as a blocker. He's not the same as a receiver, but he's better as a blocker.
Tom bringing facts.
Yeah, the Arian Smith thing is so wild because what is it? He flashes in the semifinal win against Ohio State, right? Was a huge part of that 2 seasons ago. Last year, records an appearance in almost every single game, but like doesn't have a huge statistical impact. He had the 51-yard catch against Alabama in the SEC championship game, with, I think, to your point, is the old scheme it up. Like, oh, this guy's faster than everybody. If we just do this, and this, boom, there you go, 51-yard pass. Yeah, will he crack that rotation? That's a good call right there. All right, Danny, you just mentioned Ohio State, so let's go right there. Is it Will Howard for you? What's
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Julian's saying I think he'll push. I think he'll impress, but I think it's kind of Will Howard's job to lose. For me, I think one of the more interesting things about Ohio State is Chip Kelly's, fingerprints on this offense. What tweaks does he make to Ryan Day's system? How do they utilize all these weapons in the backfield with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins? You do lose one of the best receivers, of this past season, but you've got Ibuka back. So there'll be some new guys, but I'm very curious to see if this offense, was it Kyle McCord, who I would say yes, that was a pretty significant part of the problem. I think Will Howard's an upgrade, but they got to show it, so I'm very curious to see the offensive side. Like, what does the offense look like?
I mean, give me Jeremiah Smith. Let's go.
Right.
Let's roll all these wide receivers out here. I've been spending all spring thinking about the different ways that they could piece this together. And, maybe wasn't it Emeka Ibuka that like at his early enrollee freshman year had a big spring game? I mean, there is at least a standard of these guys coming in, and whether it is schemed up for them or, they just have a little bit of that extra fire playing in the shoe for the first time. By the way, Brady on the call. This game's going to be on Fox.
Oh, is this Brady on the call? They didn't have Klatt do it?
No. So we're going to have Brady, Urban.
Nice.
I think it's like the All-American girl, Jenny Taft. I mean, I think they're rolling out the A-team.
Why not? And I'll say that is one thing I am really excited about this weekend is getting college football on a big stage, not buried on some streaming service where you got to, find it somewhere. It's going to feel big. And we're bigger than Ohio State with all the expectations on them. And then it's in Michigan next week, right? The 20th? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wish they would do this more. I wish they would put more on there. I think ESPN is only doing one. I think it's Bama, but I mean, you could find all of them, but again, they're
on
kind
the
of
streaming service, right?
Yeah.
Maybe SEC Network. I think they might air some, but
I want to see what the red zone offense looks like with Ohio State. Because I wrote about this week. You can read the story on CBSSports.com. I think the primary reason they wanted Will Howard over Kyle McCord was the red zone struggles last year, because this was a team, if you look at the numbers, I compared them to all the other, playoff teams in Georgia. Like Ohio State did a very good job of getting to the red zone, but they didn't finish drives last year, and they couldn't run the ball in the red zone. So Will Howard coming in, because Kyle McCord was never a threat to use his legs. So it was 10 on 11. Now with Will Howard, it's pretty basic math. It's back to 11 on 11, which should help improve their offensive, their prowess in the red zone, especially inside the 10 and 5, which is where they really struggled last year because that offensive line was not great. So when they were going 10 on 11, they weren't getting a ton of push. And Travion Henderson was the only guy who was really successful down there. Mine Williams and Chip Trainum did not have much of an impact. So you bring Will Howard in, who was a very successful rusher for Kansas State, particularly in the red zone. You bring in Quinshon Judkins, who has a big body and can kind of push people out of the way in the red zone. That's what I'm really interested in, because if Ohio State's red zone offense gets back to just normal this year, that's a team that's going to be in the playoff at minimum.
I'll also just say the name Devin Brown. We have not seen him healthy for an extended stretch throughout his Ohio State career, and he's still around. And I know he's saying the whole, like, I'm competing for the job thing, but it takes two to tango. And there has to be some part of Ohio State that thinks if he actually stayed healthy and balled out, could win the job, because he hasn't transferred yet. I mean, maybe he'll just do so in a week, but I am curious to see how he looks.
I think he's done, honestly, at least at Ohio State, because I do think that we just talked about with Will Howard in the red zone. That was basically what they were hoping Devin Brown's role was going to be last year, and they used him in that role, but he kept getting hurt.
Yeah.
have we done the over under on how many of these guys? So it's 5 former 4-star or better prospects: Will Howard, Lincoln Kineholtz, Devin Brown, Aaron Nolan, Julian Sayin. Over under 2.5 entering the portal after April 15th.
Under.
Over under 1.5.
I think it'll be 2.
Over.
Over. Yeah.
Do you think it's 2 upperclassmen, or you think it's one of the upperclassmen and one of the freshmen?
One upperclassman, one freshman.
Yeah, I think that probably works.
Like Devin Brown and Lincoln, was it in the old Batman movie? Joker breaks the pool cue and he like hands one to each of them. It's like Devin Brown and Lincoln Kineholtz are both going to get out. Only one stay, one leaves, and then Julian Sayin, Aaron Nolan, one stay, one leave.
I like that in your mind. Dark Knight is the old Joker movie.
Well, yeah, because they've made like 9 Joker movies since then.
Yeah, but I would say the old one is like the one with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. That's the old Joker movie.
Sure, but I don't know. The
you
new
were like
one,
5 at the time.
89, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that Batman 1?
Yeah.
Prince, I call it the Prince Batman for the record. Yeah, I was 2 or 3 years old. So yeah. Hey, but look, where can I get me one of those toys? That's how I was still like into it as a kid. Of course. All right. Danny, you just mentioned it earlier. You think Jalen Milroe needs to take a step forward for Alabama here for Kalen DeBoer, to be realized, right? You think we can see it in this spring game?
It's going to be early to ask, like, to notice a noticeable improvement. I'm curious to see what Austin Mack looks like. I mean, he was more familiar with the system. I mean, to me, that always helps. If you have 2 equal talents, and maybe Jalen Milroe clearly is a better athlete than Austin Mack, but Austin Mack might be the more gifted thrower. Familiarity with the system should make you look better. Like, you're more comfortable. You're not thinking as much. But yes, to answer your question, I think we need to see that. I don't know if we get it now. I mean, remember last spring was a disaster, right? I mean, that's why they went out and added in the portal. I don't think it'll be that. But I cannot wait to see if they're asking Jalen Milroe to air it out and stretch the field vertically the way Michael Penix did. But I don't envision Milroe succeeding in that role. I mean, he throws a beautiful deep ball, so maybe it is. I am very curious to see what it looks like in that system.
He throws a very beautiful rainbow deep ball. He doesn't have that kind of drive to it that Michael Penix had. That was kind of important for that offense. So yeah, I don't think anything is going to be settled in the spring for Alabama, but you would hope to see Milroe at least, looking somewhat comfortable in that offense. If he's not, I mean, it's not like an emergency because there's still plenty of time before the season starts, but you just like to see it to kind of calm your nerves a little bit.
I think you guys pretty much said it. Like I want to see that. I want to see Austin Mack. I want to see just how good some of these young receivers are, for sure.
Has DeBoer said like Jalen Milroe's our starter?
Yes,
more or less. Yeah.
Okay, I was curious because I mean, the new coach could come in there and say everybody's got to prove their job, starting with the quarterback, and you could. But I mean, that's a ton of pressure on Jalen Milroe if you said that. So I think it makes more sense for him to, go with the starter and then see what happens.
Yeah, he kind of voted confidence in him and like implied it. He wasn't like he's the guy. There's no doubts. Like no matter what.
Right. No, it was like this is his team. It was sort of like he's hey, look,
he's our leader.
He's our leader. This is his team. This was a group that made it to the playoffs last year. I won an SEC championship. I think he is respecting the success of last year's Crimson Tide team and ascribing some of that success to Jalen Milroe yes, of course he's the guy until he's not,
right.
Not 100%. He's got it. No one can push him, but that he certainly starts the depth chart, not with an or beside his name, but as QB1.
Yeah. It wasn't as strong as like Jonathan Smith saying Aiden Childs will be getting all the QB1 reps. He is our starter.
Right. Wasn't that quite.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember, just as you're watching spring football games over the next couple weeks, they are not all created equal. You can very much script things a certain way, not only with the script that you're calling plays, but who's going against who. Are you going ones versus ones, or are you going ones versus twos, or even worse, to make your offense, your starters look better In some cases, you might want to roll out ones versus ones. What do we got? That's probably Georgia's mentality. Like, hey, we got to get better. The best way to improve is go against ourselves. And then you've got maybe an offensive coach like a Kalen DeBoer who wants to go out and impress and have Jalen Milroe look good in his offense. I'm not saying I don't know what their deal is for spring football, but you can manipulate things, right? You can, and you should, in that situation, you should look good.
Also, so many stupid scoring systems that make no sense.
Yeah, those are stupid.
The UNLV one was insane.
Danny, two things. Number one, did you happen? I mean, I know that you were there, so you might have missed it, but did you see that NC State went 1s on 3s?
Oh, I did not.
It was 51-7 at the end of that.
It should be.
Everybody had a good day.
Everybody had a great day. Grayson McCall.
Except for the threes. The threes are all wondering if they want to keep playing football.
I'll never forget because I think I got caught up in the moment. I forgot to remind myself this. Charlie Brewer, 15 for 15 in Utah spring game. They were off to the races.
Okay.
And then I forgot about probably was 1 versus 3s with Charlie Brewer back then.
And then I was just going to ask either as a player or even from your seat now, because like Clemson does the draft, right? The starters are kind of split up orange and white. Yep. Sometimes it's a little bit more structural, either as a player or even from your seat right now. What kind of spring game do you favor?
It's a good question. Letting the players draft can create some issues, I think, within a locker room sometimes. I like trying to divvy up the teams and making it equal and play as close to a game as you can. Mm-hmm. Like and even put your coordinators in those positions. And if you're the head coach and you're the play caller, give somebody else the opportunity to do it. Try new things, but also I like to see 1s versus 1s. I'm a little bit old school. That's kind of what we had to deal with. And because most of the times in practice, it was always 1s versus 2s. And you had this false sense of security of, oh, those 1s look great. And then all of a sudden you go 1s versus 1s, and it's either one side of the ball or the other is like, oh boy, we got a lot of things we got to work on before the season starts. And I know from my standpoint, when it was at Florida State, like we were playing against NFL guys. Like that was my hardest game probably of the year outside of Miami and maybe Florida. Was that game was going to be on, like the hardest hitting, closest coverage, the quickest. You had to get rid of the ball. And so I always felt like it was a really, like we were talking about Georgia, like that to me is why I think they're so good. That competition in spring makes you better and, kind of hones your craft.
I remember, I don't know if it was Francois. It was somebody like the late Jimmo years. I forgot who the captains were for the spring game draft, but I remember thinking like, these guys are idiots. Like you picked like your best friend and then like a running back. And meanwhile, there's only 2 playable tackles on the entire roster, and you just let the other guy take both. So like, good luck getting sacked 18 times. Just like no football sense as far as like what might help me win or even help me look good. Like it was.
If the head coach is in charge of splitting up the team to make it kind of even, I love making one coordinator head coach of one team, one coordinator head coach of the other. Yep. Anything that introduces as much competition as possible. Danny, what were did y'all have open spring games? Like,
yeah. It was wild because they used to always, it was kind of a thing. They'd only do one half of the stadium. And so it'd be, we'd probably have 20, 30,000, I'm guessing, probably around there. And then on the other side, Bobby Bowden would walk up and he'd be sitting like right in the middle of the whole other side. Like 30 rows up from the bottom, just in the middle of the stand by himself, and just sat back and watched like a fan, just sat there, didn't do it, just watched and like would take some notes because he was a big watch from the tower guy. He didn't come down. So that was always like a picture they'd show, in the newspaper the day after. It'd be like, there's Coach Bowden just by himself taking it all in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more spring games we want to get to before we get out of here. Might also hit some others on Thursday as a part of our mailbag episode. But coming up on the other side, big season for Penn State in a reworked Big Ten. Miami versus expectations, the rivalry that goes back decades. Well, we'll get to see what happens in the spring game. And Nico era here. Get into that and more next.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. pitch perfect.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, Tom, Penn State, it's got a quarterback set. We know that the two-headed monster at running back is still there. What's our big keys here for what are we looking for the Nittany Lions?
I just want to see what the offense looks like, not as far as the players, just
Oh,
the actual offense. Andy Kotelnicki's there. I want to see, is Kotelnicki bringing his same offense that he ran at Kansas, or is he going to be molding it to what Penn State is and just trying to work in little bells and whistles that, whatever. But I'm hoping it's the one he ran at Kansas, because the one he ran at Kansas is very, very fun to watch. And I think if you have Penn State's personnel, it could be really, really fun to watch, particularly because I still don't know what they have at receiver. So it will be interesting to see what's there, who stands out, if anybody. But if I'm a Penn State fan, it's the spring game, and you know how they are about this stuff. They never want to put everything out there for other teams to see, but just overall, what are the formations? What are we doing? Just that kind of stuff. I want to see how different it looks from what we're used to seeing from Penn State in the last few years.
Also, they use Drew Aller as a runner.
Yeah.
Because I mean, whether it was Bean or Daniels, they ran their quarterback. So they try to do that. I think Drew Aller is one of the most underrated quarterbacks out there. I mean, his touchdown to interception ratio, and I know it's not just that. I mean, but that's just decision making in general. And maybe it was a little too conservative, and was in Columbus to watch against Ohio State. It wasn't great, but there weren't a lot of great options for him either. So that's why I'm curious to see what receiver steps up. But I think this guy's the limit for Drew Aller. Also, Manny Diaz gone, Tom Allen in. The defense, does they have any changes? Because Manny Diaz was pretty innovative and liked to get after it. Does Tom Allen keep that aggressive nature? And then two big pieces on the offensive and defensive line, and Chop Robinson and Oli Fashanu. Those are pretty big pieces they've got to replace. So, I mean, there should be a lot of optimism around Penn State, but there's a lot of newness to them too, which is unique.
I would add to that the center. He's gone to the NFL. Forgot his name. But
Hunter
Norzad. A lot of NFL draft buzz. Curious to see how they replace him. Perbula as well, the other quarterback, in addition to Drew. He's more of that runner type. I'm curious to see, could we see some 80-20 quarterback stuff? Julian Fleming had a pretty good interview on Lions 247 the other day where he was talking about how he feels like is the first spring in his college career where he's ever actually been healthy. So I don't know if that's true. A lot of guys just kind of, blame
best shape of my life.
But he definitely has struggled with injury in the past. So hopefully it is true. Hopefully he's feeling great and can be a baller for that.
Going back to your thing about Allard, Danny, there's a lot of stuff he needs to work on. There's a lot of stuff he wasn't great at last year, but he also has moments that you're just kind of oh, that you see from you just don't see from a lot of QBs. It's you'll watch a game and it'll be okay, that's bad. And then, ooh, wow. Why can't we see more of that? So trying to develop that kind of consistency and bring that to the field every single week.
Yeah, definitely under discussed. I'm not ready to go underrated. We need to he could be rightly rated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's probably a fair assessment.
We'll see. Well, talented. Now let's watch it all click over, especially against the best teams on the schedule. Tom, it's Nico time, baby.
Damn straight.
I mean, Danny, they're just gonna let him cook, right?
I mean, Heupel doesn't know any other way, right? I mean, he's gonna be chucking it. He's gonna be slinging it around the yard without question.
I bet you Nico throws for 400 yards in their spring game. That's going to be in the script. It's just going to be shot after shot after shot after shot.
Also, unlike some of the other places that we're discussing here, who else is getting these reps?
Nobody.
This guy's going to be putting in almost a full game's worth of reps in the spring game. So I'm absolutely here for every bit of Tennessee's offense to get out there and cook. I mean, but is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Tennessee is deeper at receiver this year than they were last year. I'm curious to see Tennessee's offensive line. That's probably the group that is going to decide if this team, is more like an 8-4, 9-3 team, or more of that 11 or 12 win, SEC champion type team. I think they'll be better in the back end overall, just with experience, and the D line should really eat. And I would be looking to see just how good or bad does the offensive line look here in this spring game, because that D line I think is a tough one for them.
But Miami, Ole Miss, LSU, or maybe another one that we don't have mentioned here. Sort of spotlight anything that you want to make sure we hit before we get out of here.
I think LSU is fascinating. I mean, you're replacing 2 first-round receivers. You're replacing a quarterback in Jaden Daniels, who's going to go first round. So how good does Nussmeier look? I mean, there's all kinds of rumors that I can't really find the sourcing for about like LSU trying to get Kyron Drones from Virginia Tech, which like everybody's been asking me on this in the DMs. Like, guys, I got nothing on this. Like, I'm not reporting that. I have no idea what's going on there. Like, from all accounts, LSU likes Nussmeier, and they promoted from within for the offensive coordinator position. Yeah, from the quarterback coach. So that would be surprising. So I want to see how Nussmeier looks, obviously. I want to see the new receivers. And I want to see, like, just how different does this defense actually look with the new DC?
Tom?
This is the first I'm hearing of Kyron Drones LSU rumors. So I'm just.
I'd be terrified if I was a Hokie fan, though, because they got deep pockets and he looked awesome last year. But so we don't want to rustle up any feathers, but I would understand the interest for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, Bud pretty much covered it all with the LSU game. It's just I want to see the new receivers. I want to see Kyron Lacey. I want to see Nuss throwing 80-yard bombs. I want to see all of that. I want to see that defense kind of what it looks like. Because I mean, the secondary was bad, and they've lost a couple guys up front too. So it's like not only do you have to get better in the secondary, but if your defensive line gets worse, it's going to be much harder to look better in the secondary. But I don't think LSU's defensive line is one of those situations where I kind of have a certain level of anticipation it's going to be pretty good every year.
Virginia Tech, by the way, also having their spring game on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Which uniform will Kyron Drones be wearing? That would shock me, but let's just push it. Like Kyron Drones, I don't know. He's been shopping for houses in Baton Rouge.
Oh, I don't want to do that, man. Like they work so hard.
We're gonna get a lot of these
coming from.
Yeah.
We're gonna get these too.
Oh, what? These rumors?
Oh no, not. We're gonna get some moves. We're gonna get movement too. Like we'll get rumors. Trust me, we'll get a lot of those. And I do not know if it's going to be Kyron Drones to LSU, but we will get some blockbuster moves. It's inevitable.
Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No,
like with the setup that they have, I think Nussmeier has shown in his bowl games to be a way better passer than Drones has shown through like 8 games of passing the ball. Mm-hmm. You know, now Drones is a much better runner. If it was some different SEC team who was really desperate for a quarterback, maybe, but I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But it just won't seem to quit.
Brent Pry, go knock off some Hokie Stone and sell it on eBay, buddy. We gotta get those pockets up. We are competing against the Southeastern Conference. You got so much momentum, so many good positive vibes around the Hokies.
Hokie Stone is euphemism for heroin, by the way. Just involve some Hokie Stone.
Sound like it.
I do not endorse using smack to raise NIL funds.
Hey, you know what? I'd rather they did that than make us pay for it, just being honest.
Ole Miss, I'm expecting will be a Lane show, give us something. I mean, he understands what the spotlight is. I don't think I've got a lot of football related questions there. Miami, Cam Ward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other big ones? I don't think so. So North Carolina is holding an organized practice at 10 a.m.
as opposed to a disorganized one.
That's like their public.
Love it.
Like,
I mean,
that's their spring game, right?
Yeah.
You can see the morning group finish as they come down like 17-18. Like North Carolina, I applaud you for this.
They understand it's Masters weekend.
Yes, exactly.
You know what, bud? I hadn't thought about that. I had alarm bells go off. I was like, oh, Mac doesn't want to have a spring game. Okay. Interesting.
Maybe Mac wants to watch the Masters.
Say Mac. Next thing you know, Mac will be at like the 13th hole on Saturday watching the Masters.
Hopping on the
Yeah, you got the helicopter fired up to take him over.
I remember Cutcliffe did that at Duke, and it was like ACC Network showed up like, all right, we're here for the spring game. And Cutcliffe was like, cool, come in the indoor facility. We're doing drills in different sections. And the ACC Network cameras are there, and they're pushing the sled. Here we go. It's the spring game. Hey, you told me 15 practices. I'm going to use all 15 of these practices. Good on them. That will be on North Carolina, 10 a.m. ACC Network. Minnesota, Thursday night. All right. You can get nobody else.
Prime time.
Yeah,
Is it behind a paywall?
No, I think it'll be on Big Ten
Big Ten
Network.
Network.
Yeah.
Yeah. Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, Boston College, Georgia Tech, Pitt, Virginia Tech, UCF and Kansas, both on Friday night. Utah, Houston, and Cincinnati. Not all of these are going to be on television, even on the streaming services. Some of these we are going to rely on our sources from 24/7 Sports and otherwise to be able to help fill us in for when we do circle back on the other side with our with our thoughts and the things that we learned from this spring game weekend. All right, so tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Any other leftover spring game thoughts that we might have had and not gotten to today? But most importantly, it's a day to be able to have a conversation with you. That's right. We're going to jump into the big old bag of mail. We're going to be talking to the Cover 3 Tailgate, taking questions from both before the show and during the show. And it is, viewer beware, the most distracted episode of the year. I mean, we are here for you. But yeah, the best thing that could happen for our attention spans would be a weather delay, right?
But isn't it only the highlights? Because I don't think they start the broadcast till like 3, right?
The Masters app, you can watch some of the features.
Yeah.
I'll have the Masters app on my TV. And can't you watch
And on
them on
Paramount Plus. Yes.
Yes, Paramount Plus, Paramount Plus, Paramount Plus.
Yeah, Paramount Plus, Paramount Plus. You can watch all the Masters action. You can watch featured group coverage. You can watch, live from 15-16, Amen Corner. All the different options are just incredible. A wealth of options to take in the Masters starting tomorrow.
Like, if you're in the chat, do you think that we did the weekend preview show on a Wednesday as opposed to a Thursday because we just want to have a casual mailbag tomorrow and watch the Masters during the show? You're right. Yeah.
In fact, you know what? We're just going to live stream the Masters tomorrow. Forget the mailbag. We'll just let you know what's going on.
Buddy, I was thinking.
You want to see if the execs watch Cover 3? Let's do that.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, you want to see some, but we joke about different people pushing the button on us because they're mad about things we say. Yeah, watch us pump in a live feed of the Masters and see how quickly the button gets pushed on us. Yeah, they'll figure it out pretty quick. But again, it should be a great time as we continue to get everything set. NCAA tournament done. College football really does occupy the rest of April as we wrap everything up and set the table. We'll have the transfer portal opening up on the 15th. That'll lead to a lot more movement and conversation. So we're excited to be able to rock here for the next couple of weeks. And then we hit summer school, off season, that sort of May, June section of the calendar. So come and join us 11 a.m. Eastern time for the big old bag of mail and live questions from the tailgate. And you can follow him on Twitter at BudElliott3. You can follow him at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See ya.